Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So the paper I'm presenting here was the outcome of a research collaboration that we have for many years with the University of California in Berkeley. And the interesting aspect also is we're always looking into DSM applications. And Professor Tomerlein, she's from the construction industry, or focusing on project management and construction industry. So there's always some synergies between mechanical engineering and also in construction. And we are continuing for the next years in this collaboration to kind of bring the mechanical engineering and the construction industry business and perspective together. So it's maybe also some insights for maybe like new collaborations in the future. So what I'm going to talk about is organizational design using the viable system model. And somehow there's a problem with the presentation. 1 second. Okay, looks better. So again, just some theoretical input. And then I will look into case studies that are already there in the literature using the viable system model. And then I will come up with this model for the domain-specific application of this viable system model. I'm not sure who of you is familiar with it. I will make sure that you all have some understanding of the viable system model at the end of my talk. And the major kind of motivation that drives us is that a lot of companies are working in a very dynamic environment at the moment. So there's like trends, new technologies coming up, different markets, new competitors. And companies have to make sure that they survive in such an environment. And if you look at the Kodak example, that's a good one, or not a good one, but it's an example for missing and detecting trends, right? There was a transition for digital photography, and Kodak missed invest in this technology and went bankrupt, and a lot of people lost their jobs. Another example is Nokia, right? They have been market leader for mobile phones, and then suddenly the iPhone came up and they didn't have an answer for it. So there is really also in the recent time large companies that face this problem, new competitors, new technologies, how to do transfer our business. And this is really important in this kind of dynamic environment. And one reason why companies often fail to address or like to adjust to this new environment is there's organizational problems. And that's what we are looking into. How can we enable organizations to be successful in trend monitoring and technology monitoring? And one research field that have been up there for, I guess, like more than 50 years is management cybernetics. It's kind of founded by a few scholars during and after the Second World War. So it was like a war application, how human beings interact with anti-aircraft guns, but it turned into like more normal organizational kind of theory. And the basic idea is that you have self-organization, so your organization is able to like set and adjust to the new environment. You have self-control, so there's like feedback loops. That's what you need to make sure that you adjust, and to empower the organization to respond to the environment. And as you can see here, an important concept of this management cybernetics is the concept of variety. So you have a large environment here, there's a lot of variety in it, and you have to like kind of take the variety that's interesting for your organization in, reduce it, kind of bring it to the management, and then bring it to like kind of the parts of the organization that like turn it into something kind of useful for you to survive. And something that helps you to kind of handle the variety and reduce the variety so that the management makes the right decisions is the viable system model. And the viable system model looks like this in the basic structure. So it's a functional model consisting of 5 different systems. It was introduced by Stafford Beer, and it has a recursive character. So as you can see here, a viable system model always contains a viable system model. So depending on which organizational part you're looking at, you can have like different viable system models and like layers depending on from the top management going down maybe, for example, to your different departments. And each of the systems has a certain task. So you have the policy and the identity part here. So that would be kind of the overall the gray seniority. Then you have here the strategy part that is responsible for the trend monitoring and looking into the future environment, detecting trends and technologies, and then bringing this into your organization, so the system S3, to make sure that you turn from system S3 something of those trends into operations to react to this future environment. And this model, that's why it's called the viable system model, is the basic model for all viable organizations. So organizations that can exist on their own and adapt to new circumstances. And this model should help companies to diagnose what the actual situation is and then derive implications how you could improve the situation. So it's a blueprint of a viable organization. And that's why we thought this is quite interesting, because we exactly have this trend monitoring here in this aspect, and then turning it into, bringing it into your departments, that exactly what this model covers. So how do you absorb what's out there and how do you bring it into your business? So this viable system model is an interesting foundation. And it has been there for quite a while, and there's some case studies available on the viable system model. So it hasn't been applied in different industry sectors by different scholars. And in total, there are 25 in journal papers, 25 case studies. And if you look into the different ways how it was organized, how it was applied, you could see you can use it for structural problems, so to see how the different systems connected, but also procedural problems, so to see how the different systems are interfering and coordinating and communicating, and to derive implications from that. If you look into what are you doing with this viable system model, you can see 92% are combining and diagnosis and design. So diagnosis an existing organization, and design would be like a new organization from the scratch. You can do both with this model, and only 4% are used just for the diagnosis. So often you had like a diagnosis and design combination in the case studies. And the case studies seem to be very, very helpful, and they had like good reviews and evaluations based on what was written in the papers. And the problem is that there was no blueprint how you could apply the viable system model to a new problem. So every scholar applied this model, but there was no general application framework for it. And yeah, our goal was, because we thought it was quite helpful, and we have applied it to different problems as well, and we always had good experience with it, that it helped to bring a new perspective to organizational design and procedural design. And that's why we aim to extract a guideline for it to increase the application. So that's how we came up with this research methodology. First, the foundation, the analysis of the case studies. The next step is to understand what are the similarities in applying the different case studies to detect patterns. And then the next one would be like a development of a framework based on the similarities that we detected. And then to not only describe the patterns, but also to add some value. We identified some potential levers and some potential improvement to support the application of the viable system model. So I think because of the Skype is opening all the time, the presentation somehow. 1 second. You see I'm fluent in Portuguese. So here we go. So what were the similarities if you look at the case studies? So the first step was always to identify the organizational challenge. So what is really like the pain point of your current organization? The next one was to frame the as-is situation, to really have a description, how is your organization set up at the moment? Then use a should-be description, so use the viable system model to frame the problem and to describe how it should be to be like a viable organization. And then in the end, use the should-be description as a blueprint and to change your organization. So connect departments, make sure that there's people communicating, talking to each other. There are different aspects that you can look at depending on what's missing or problematic in your viable organization. So those are the common things that we identified. And the question is now, how can you use this viable system model to solve the problems that you have in your organization on a kind of generic way? And what we came up with is the functional abstraction that was first used with the viable system model by a former PhD student of our institute, Fatos Elezi. And the idea is to kind of bring the problem into the viable system model perspective, and then bring it back to your real and proper organization to derive suggestions how you could improve the viable system model. So we kind of use this functional abstraction approach and combined it with the findings that we had from the literature based on the case studies. So what was done in literature, how can you kind of overcome organizational problems, and in the end to come out with a domain-specific viable system model application framework. And how does this look like? At first, you can see here you have two layers. So there's the organization layer, so your actual organization. Then you have this meta level. So you're using the viable system model to kind of go over beyond this border, like the barriers that you're not able to cross otherwise. And here's like a little toolbox that supports you with the different steps. So in the first two steps, it's really important to kind of understand and kind of describe the problem that you're facing. Is it, for example, that there's a problem in kind of just detecting technologies? Is it the problem bringing the technologies into your own technology? For example, if you see there's artificial intelligence, you have to incorporate it to your products or your services, for example. If this is a problem, so to really make sure that you understand what's maybe at the moment from your perspective the lack. Then use the viable system model to describe it in an as-is situation, and then you can use structural complexity management because, as I said, it's structural analysis of an organization, so you can see what are the links among the different systems, but it's also a process description. So how's the information flow, the interaction between the different systems, and that's exactly why you can use structural complexity management. I will go a bit more in detail on it in a few minutes. And in the end, you come up with a kind of domain-specific model, like a should-be description. How should your organization look like? And then kind of combine it with how your organization looks like at the moment and change your organization based on the findings that you had from the beginning here with the problem. And why is like structural complexity management so important? This viable system model, as I before mentioned, is a functional model. So it's described by over 50 functions. So each of the system has related functions and describing how this system kind of interacts, what the exchange of information, the coordination, the communication is with the other systems. And all those functions are needed to be viable as an organization, from trend monitoring, coordination, auditing is like the system at 3-star, the coordination here among the different operational units. So you have a functional list, and that's when structured complexity management becomes handy, because you can link the different functions to each other and to see where's the missing part, for example, with the corresponding person in your organization. And what we also realized is that subsystems, or the missing existence of subsystems, is always a large problem, but there was no support how you could really assess where your organization is at the moment. So what we realized, or what we analyzed, is what are the relations among the different subsystems of the organization. And you can see there's like, for example, functions that are linked within a subsystem. You have a bidirectional channel function, an output channel function, so there's different opportunities how the different systems should interact in order to be viable. And here is also a nice way to use structural complexity management, because you can really see how the functions that are important for the viability of an organization should interact and how they are interacting at the moment at your company, so you can like detect the delta between what should be there and what's there. And when you look more in detail into how the different systems should interact, there's like 4 categories how they should interact. So there can be communication, should just the exchange of information. There could be coordination, interaction, and control. So there's like different ways of interacting. And not all of the subsystems should interact or coordinate based on the functional description. So we used structural complexity management to come up with a should-be description. How should the interaction between the different subsystems should be, for example, coordination-wise. And this you can use to kind of, again, have a detailed understanding what's missing in your organization and to derive implications where you can like improve your organization and where the reason for your difficulties and problems at the moment could be. And that brings me already to the summary. So from our perspective, the viable system model is quite helpful to have an organizational blueprint, like a model of a viable organization that really helps you to kind of assess your organization and then to derive measures. And the previous case studies that are out there that have been applied in different fields, they always had like a pattern in it, but it was never kind of described the pattern. So it was quite difficult from our perspective for new people trying to apply this model to be really sure what would be the steps in order to be successful with applying this viable system model. And the structural complexity management really helped to link the different functions and the different subsystems in order to make sure that you capture all the interrelations within this organizational model. And for the outlook, we're about to finish a case study with Siemens, with technology trend monitoring, with corporate innovation, where we exactly kind of look into those aspects. How can you, as a large company with, I think, 200,000 employees, how can you make sure that you're in such a dynamic environment, be still dynamic enough and viable enough to survive under all these uncertainties and new technologies that are coming up? So hopefully next time I can give some more insights about the results of the case study. And yeah, thank you very much for your attention.